Tracy's hands shook as she bent to clean the shiny office floor, trying not to faint. Then suddenly, the bucket slipped. Water spilled. "Look at what you've done," Mr. Bellow said quietly. Too quietly. Tracy dropped to her knees immediately. "Sir, please, I'm sorry. I'm just hungry." "You dare make excuses in my office?" he barked. Tears filled her eyes. "Get out!" he shouted. "Go and die outside if you want, but not here." Tracy walked in the rain, weak, shaking, soaked. Sit back as we dive into this shocking story of humiliation, power, and a revenge no one saw coming. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. USA, Canada, France, maybe South Africa, or Jamaica. We want to know. There are people in this life who are born into softness, into full plates and warm beds, and fathers who come home every evening. And then there are people like Tracy Okonkwo, who are born into the fire and must learn to breathe inside it. Tracy was 26 years old, though life had written its story across her face in ways that made her look older. She was slender, almost too slender, with eyes that held a particular kind of quietness, the quietness that comes not from peace, but from having cried so many times that the tears had simply learned to dry faster. She wore her hair pulled back in a tight bun every single morning, not for vanity, but because loose hair had no place in a woman who spent her days on her knees scrubbing floors, wiping windows, and carrying mops through long marble corridors. She had not always been alone. Once there had been a mother with a warm laugh, and a father who sang off-key on Sunday mornings. But typhoid had taken her mother when Tracy was 11, and a bad business loan and a broken heart had taken her father 2 years after. What remained was Tracy, a 13-year-old girl, and her baby brother Emeka, 4 years old, blinking up at her with enormous, trusting eyes, as if she were the sun itself. She had become his son. It was not a role she had chosen. It was a role that life had pressed into her hands like a burning coal, and she had held it, even when it scorched her. For 13 years, Tracy had worked. She had hawked water sachets on dusty roads as a teenager. She had plaited hair for neighbours at 50 naira a session. She had washed clothes for landlords and cooked for market women and scrubbed the kitchens of those who paid too little and complained too much. And when she turned 22, she had landed the job at Bellow and Associates, a sprawling, glass-fronted corporate office in the heart of the city, as a junior cleaning staff member. The pay was meagre, the conditions were harsh, but it was steady, and steady was everything to a woman whose life had never offered her the luxury of certainty. Emeka, her brother, was now 17. He was lanky and bright-eyed, with a mind that devoured books the way other boys devoured food. Teachers at his school spoke of him in reverent tones, the kind of tones reserved for children who would one day be exceptional. But Emeka had a sickness that lived in his chest and rose up without warning, a respiratory condition that required medication, occasional hospital stays, and the kind of consistent care that cost money Tracy often did not have. So she worked. She worked before the sun rose. She worked after it set. She ate 1 meal a day on most days, sometimes none, and sent what she could home to the woman on their street, Mama Chidinma, who watched over Emeka when Tracy was away. This was Tracy's life. Quiet suffering, wrapped in a humble uniform, carrying a mop and fighting every single day just to keep her brother alive. Mr. Chukwuemeka Bello was, by most outward measures, a very successful man. He owned Bellow and Associates, a logistics and corporate consultancy firm that had grown considerably over the past decade. His office occupied the top 3 floors of a 10-story building. He drove a black Mercedes G-Wagon that he replaced every 2 years. He wore Italian shoes and Swiss watches and spoke to everyone, from his shareholders to his cleaners, with the same barely concealed contempt, as though the world existed primarily as a backdrop for his own importance. Mr. Bellow was 51 years old, heavy-set, with a carefully trimmed beard and eyes that assessed everything for its usefulness to him. He had grown up in moderate comfort, but had clawed his way to wealth through a combination of cunning, ruthlessness, and an absolute refusal to feel sorry for anyone who was struggling. In his philosophy, poverty was a personal failure. The poor were poor because they were lazy, undisciplined, or stupid, and he had no patience for any of those things. He treated his cleaning staff the way some men treat old furniture, necessary, but invisible unless something went wrong. And when something went wrong, his fury was swift and merciless. Tracy had felt that fury before. She had been spoken to like a child, dismissed with waves of his hand, denied her break times, and docked pay for infractions as minor as leaving a mop in the wrong corner. She had endured it all with the quiet resilience of a woman who had no choice until the morning everything collapsed. It was a Tuesday in late October, and Tracy had not eaten in 36 hours. She had given Emeka the last of the rice the evening before. The pot had been small, the portions thinner than she let on, and she had watched him eat with a smile stitched carefully onto her face. He was running a slight fever. His inhaler was almost empty. The medication refill would cost 3,000 naira she did not have until payday on Friday. So she had given him the food, tucked him in, and gone to bed on an empty stomach, telling herself she could manage. She could not manage. By the time she reached the office the next morning, her head was swimming. She had drunk 2 glasses of water before leaving the house. She carried the lightest mop she could find. She told herself just a few hours. Just get through the morning. She was cleaning the private corridor outside Mr. Bellow's office when it happened. Her arms had grown weak from dehydration. The bucket was full and heavier than she could handle. Her fingers lost their grip for just a moment, just one terrible, irreversible moment, and the bucket tilted and the water rushed across the freshly polished marble floor in a broad, glittering wave. Tracy gasped. She reached for the bucket. She was already on her knees trying to contain the spill when the office door opened and Mr. Bellow stepped out. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. He looked at the water. He looked at Tracy. His jaw tightened. "Look at what you've done," he said quietly. "Sir, please, I'm sorry, I'm just hungry." The words came out before she could stop them. They were not an excuse. They were a confession, small and desperate, from a woman whose body had simply reached its limit. "You dare make excuses in my office?" His voice had risen now, filling the corridor. A secretary at the far end looked up from her desk and looked away quickly. "I haven't eaten, sir. Please forgive me." "Get out," he bellowed. "Pack your things and go. I will not have incompetent, useless people destroying my property. Go and die outside if you want, but not here." Tracy stood slowly. Her knees were trembling. She looked at him once, just once, and there was something in her eyes in that moment that was not defeat. It was something older and quieter than defeat. It was the look of a woman filing something away, deep inside herself, in a place no humiliation could reach. She said nothing. She went to the small back room where the cleaning supplies were kept, changed out of her uniform, folded it neatly, and placed it on the shelf. She collected her bag. She walked out of the building into the rain. The rain had no mercy that afternoon. It came down in sheets, turning the roads into shallow rivers, soaking Tracy through within minutes of stepping outside. She walked without direction. Her body was already running on empty. No food, no sleep, and now this and the combination of cold rain and hollow grief was more than her legs could bear. She made it 3 streets from the office before the world began to tilt. She sat down on the low wall of a compound, meaning to rest for just a moment. But her vision blurred, and the sound of rain grew distant, and her body finally did what she had been preventing it from doing all morning. It gave up. She did not even feel herself fall. When Tracy opened her eyes, she was not on the street. She was lying on a cot in a warm room that smelled of camphor and old wood and something that might have been stew. The ceiling above her was low and had a small water stain shaped like a leaf. A yellow curtain moved gently in the breeze from an open window. "You're awake." The voice was warm and unhurried, like the voice of someone who had never found reason to rush. Tracy turned her head. Sitting beside the cot was an elderly woman with a round, soft face and grey hair twisted up in a simple knot. She was perhaps 70, small in stature, wrapped in a faded blue house dress. Her eyes were bright and kind in the particular way of people who have chosen kindness deliberately after a long life of understanding what the alternatives cost. "My name is Mrs. Adebayo," the woman said. "I found you on the wall outside. My driver almost walked past you. You're safe now." Tracy tried to sit up. Mrs. Adebayo placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Rest small. There's food coming." Tracy did not cry. She had not planned to cry. But something about the word food, spoken without condition, without price, simply offered, broke something open in her chest, and the tears came before she could hold them back. Mrs. Adebayo did not make a fuss of it. She simply moved her chair closer and sat quietly until the tears stopped, the way people used to do before the world grew too busy for other people's grief. A young girl brought a tray, a bowl of pepper soup, a plate of eba, a glass of cold water. Tracy ate slowly because her stomach had forgotten how to receive generosity. Mrs. Adebayo watched her eat with an expression of quiet satisfaction. Later, when the bowl was empty and the warmth had returned to Tracy's limbs, the old woman asked her story. Tracy told it. Not all at once, and not without difficulty, but she told it the orphanhood, the brother, the job, the humiliation. She told it plainly, the way honest people tell their pain, without performance, without exaggeration, just the bare and unflinching truth. Mrs. Adebayo listened without interrupting. When Tracy finished, the old woman was quiet for a long moment. "You are not weak," she said finally. "Anyone who has carried what you have carried for this long is not weak. You are just tired. There is a difference." She told Tracy she could stay the night. Then she told her she could stay the week. It was said gently but firmly, in the tone of someone who had made a decision and would not be argued with. That night, lying on the cot with a full stomach for the first time in 2 days, Tracy looked at the ceiling and felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like something was about to change. Mrs. Adebayo's home was a modest compound house in a quiet part of the city. It was neat and well kept, with flower pots along the front veranda and a small vegetable garden at the back. She lived alone, tended to by a rotating cast of neighborhood grandchildren and a housekeeper named Patience, who had been with her for 20 years. Over the following days, Tracy rested, helped around the house without being asked, and found herself talking more and more with the old woman over morning tea. Mrs. Adebayo asked sharp, thoughtful questions about Tracy's ambitions, her brother, what she imagined her life might look like if given the chance. Tracy answered honestly, sometimes surprised by the answers she found inside herself. "I want Emeka to finish school," she said one morning. "I want him to go to university. I want him to become whatever he is meant to become, not whatever poverty allows him to become." "There is a difference." Mrs. Adebayo smiled. "And for yourself?" Tracy was quiet. No one had asked her that in a very long time. "I want to own something," she said finally. "I don't know what, but something that is mine, that no one can take away from me." The old woman nodded slowly, as if Tracy had said something she had been waiting to hear. 4 days after Tracy arrived, a car pulled up outside the compound, a modest but well-maintained Camry, and out stepped a man in his early 40s, tall and lean, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and an open, thinking kind of face. He embraced Mrs. Adebayo warmly. "My son," the old woman said, turning to Tracy. David, this is Tracy." David Adebayo shook Tracy's hand with genuine attention, the kind of handshake that involves looking at the person, not past them. His mother told him Tracy's story over lunch. David listened carefully, occasionally asking a quiet question. He did not offer sympathy the way people sometimes do with pity coating every word. He offered something rarer. Careful interest. David Adebayo was a successful entrepreneur. He ran a mid-sized logistics company, a real estate advisory firm, and had recently launched a foundation focused on skills development for young people from low-income backgrounds. He was not the richest man in the city, but he was known for being relentlessly competent and deeply ethical, a combination that made people in his industry both respect and occasionally resent him. "You've been a cleaner for 4 years, he said to Tracy at one point. "What else can you do?" Tracy thought about it seriously. "I can organize," she said. "I can manage. When I worked at the office, I was the one the other cleaners came to when they didn't know how things were supposed to be done. I made the rosters, I tracked the supplies, I reported the maintenance issues. I did it because someone had to, not because I was paid for it." David studied her. "Did anyone acknowledge that?" "No." "Were you ever going to stop doing it anyway?" "No." He nodded slowly. "That tells me everything I need to know." The next morning, David made Tracy a proposal. He had a position at his logistics company, administrative in nature, entry-level but real. It came with a salary 3 times what she had earned at Bellow and Associates. It also came with access to a correspondence degree program he had partnered with, through which employees could study business administration part-time at the company's expense. Tracy sat with the offer for 1 full minute in silence. "Why?" she asked. "Because my mother has excellent judgment," he said, "and because the world is full of people with potential who were never given a door. I try to find those people and open the door. What they do after they walk through it, that's entirely up to them. Tracy thought of Emeka's empty inhaler. She thought of Mama Chidinma watching him through the week. She thought of the folded uniform on the shelf in the cleaning room at Bellow and Associates. "I will not disappoint you," she said. "I know," said David. What followed were years of the hardest and most rewarding work Tracy had ever done. She started as an administrative assistant in David's logistics company. She came in early and left late, not to perform diligence, but because she genuinely could not bear to leave a thing unfinished. She learned the filing systems in the first week, and by the second week she had reorganized them in a way that reduced retrieval time by half. Her supervisor noticed. David noticed. Nobody said much, but the quality of the assignments they gave her began to change. At the same time, she threw herself into her correspondence degree with the desperation of someone who had been starving, not just for food, but for knowledge. She studied at night, at weekends, during her lunch breaks, with textbooks propped against her thermos flask. Business law, financial management, organizational behavior, strategic planning. The language of business had always felt like a foreign country to her, something that belonged to other people. Now, slowly and then suddenly, it became her language too. Emeka's situation improved dramatically. With the higher salary, Tracy was able to put him on a consistent medication schedule. His health stabilized, his grades, already strong, became extraordinary. He won a state-level science competition in his second year of senior secondary school, and his school principal wrote to Tracy personally to express what a remarkable young man he was becoming. Tracy kept that letter in the small notebook where she tracked her monthly expenses. She read it on difficult days. At work, she climbed steadily. Administrative assistant became operations coordinator. Operations coordinator became regional logistics manager. Through every transition, she brought the same qualities that had once made her the most organized cleaner in Bellow and Associates: discipline, honesty, a meticulous attention to detail, and a profound respect for processes that most people found tedious. She was not flashy. She did not chase titles. But she understood, with a clarity that came from years of having nothing, that every skill she built was a brick in the wall of a life that no one could take from her. Mrs. Adebayo remained a quiet constant in Tracy's life, a cup of tea on Sunday afternoons, a steady presence on the phone when things were hard, a warm presence at Emeka's secondary school graduation, sitting in the front row as though she had every right to be there. Tracy had stopped thinking of her as a stranger who had been kind. She thought of her as family, the kind that life assembles for you when blood lets you down. David, for his part, watched Tracy's growth with the satisfaction of a man who had made a good investment, not in the cold financial sense, but in the human sense. He mentored her carefully, pointing her toward opportunities, introducing her to his network, and trusting her with increasing responsibility. But he was careful never to take credit for what was, at its core, Tracy's own relentless making of herself. By the time Tracy was 31, 5 years after the morning the bucket fell, she had her degree, a solid reputation in the city's business community, and enough savings to do something she had been quietly planning for 3 years. She started her own company. It was a supply chain management and procurement consultancy, small at first, operating out of a rented office space with 3 employees. Tracy ran it the way she ran everything, with exacting standards and a deep instinct for organization. Within 18 months, The company had 10 clients, 12 employees, and a revenue figure that made David Adebayo smile quietly when she showed it to him. She called the company Resilient Solutions. The name was not an accident. While Tracy was building, Mr. Bellow was slowly and very publicly falling apart. It did not happen overnight. Collapse rarely does. It happens the way water erodes rock gradually, invisibly, and then all at once. Mr. Bellow's problems began with his management style. For years, his arrogance had driven away talented employees who could have anchored his business. He hired sycophants because they never challenged him, and he punished anyone who told him the truth. The result was a company full of people who were either afraid or incompetent, and sometimes both. His logistics contracts began hemorrhaging after a series of delivery failures caused by poor internal coordination, the kind of coordination that a good operations manager would have caught. He had fired 3 operations managers in 2 years because each one had, at some point, presented him with information he did not want to hear. The 4th stopped presenting him with information at all, and the mistakes multiplied in the silence. Then came the financial mismanagement. Mr. Bellow had expanded too quickly, borrowing heavily against projected revenues that his failing operations could not generate. Creditors grew impatient. A major client, a government contract that had been the backbone of his revenue for 7 years, was not renewed. An investigation into delayed deliveries had turned up procurement irregularities, nothing that resulted in prosecution, but enough to severely damage his reputation. His personal life deteriorated alongside the professional. His wife, who had long been uncomfortable with his cruelty toward staff, quietly began making arrangements of her own. His adult children maintained polite distance. The friends and associates who had crowded his life during his years of prosperity grew scarce in the way that fair-weather companions always do. By the time Tracy was establishing Resilient Solutions as a recognized name in the industry, Mr. Bellow was sitting in his shrinking office, surrounded by files from lawyers and letters from banks, wondering where exactly everything had gone so spectacularly wrong. He was not a man built for self-reflection, but the evidence was impossible to avoid. The things he had done, the people he had dismissed, humiliated, and discarded had not disappeared. They had simply regrouped, grown, and moved on without him. The world had turned, and he was on the wrong side of it. It was a Thursday morning in March, almost 6 years to the week, since a bucket of water had spilled on a marble floor when Mr. Bellow's assistant placed a call to Resilient Solutions. He needed a meeting with the CEO. His company required a partnership or acquisition arrangement with a firm that could stabilize its supply chain operations. He had heard Resilient Solutions was the best in the region for that kind of work. He was desperate enough to try. The receptionist at Resilient Solutions was a cheerful young woman named Blessing, who had been hired straight from the foundation David Adebayo ran. She booked the appointment professionally, confirmed the details, and sent through the standard briefing documents. She did not recognize the name Bellow and Associates. She was too young to know that story, but Tracy recognized it. She was in a strategy meeting when Blessing brought the appointment request to her attention. She looked at the company name on the paper. She looked at it for a long moment, the way you look at something you recognize from a dream. Then she looked up and said calmly, "Book him in for Friday at 10 and prepare the standard intake file." She said nothing more about it. That night, she sat at her desk long after her employees had gone home. The city hummed outside her window, all its lights and noise and motion. She thought about a marble corridor, a bucket of water, a man's voice telling her to go and die outside, her knees on a cold floor, rain on her face. She thought about what she wanted from Friday. Not cruelty. She had never wanted cruelty. She had seen enough of it to know it left everyone smaller. What she wanted was something harder to name, something that sat between justice and clarity and the quiet, certain knowledge that she had been right. Right to survive, right to keep going, right to believe, even when everything told her not to, that she was worth more than the conditions she had been born into. She went home, made her brother's favourite soup. He was in his second year of university now, studying engineering, home for the short break, and watched him eat with the same smile she had been perfecting since he was 4 years old. Except now, the smile was real. Friday came with a bright, almost aggressive sunshine, the kind of morning that seems to announce itself. Mr. Bellow arrived at Resilient Solutions at 5 minutes to 10. He was wearing what had once been a very good suit, now slightly loose on him, as though his body had been quietly shrinking under the weight of his circumstances. His hair was greying more heavily than before. His shoes were still good, but the soles were beginning to show wear. He carried a thin portfolio under his arm. He was shown to a waiting area, clean, well furnished, with a receptionist who offered him water and spoke to him with a politeness that he had rarely extended to others. He waited. He checked his watch. He straightened his tie. At exactly 10 o'clock, the receptionist said, "The CEO will see you now." He was led down a short corridor to a set of glass doors. They opened. The office was not ostentatious. It was well appointed and purposeful, a large desk, bookshelves with organized volumes, a potted plant in the corner, framed certificates and community awards on the wall. Sunlight came through a wide window. It was the office of a person who worked seriously. At the desk, rising to her feet as he entered, was a woman. She was slender, composed, wearing a well-cut burgundy blazer. Her hair was pulled back, still, always pulled back. Her eyes were quiet, and in those eyes, as recognition moved through them both like a slow wave, was not triumph, not anger, not vindictive satisfaction. What was in Tracy's eyes was something far more powerful than any of those things. It was peace. Mr. Bellow stopped walking. The portfolio slipped slightly in his grip. His mouth opened and then closed. The colour in his face shifted, retreating, as his brain worked through what his eyes were telling him. The cleaner. The girl on her knees in the corridor. The water on the floor. "Go and die outside if you want, but not here." "Good morning, Mr. Bellow," Tracy said. Her voice was even, warm, even. "Please sit down." He sat. He did not seem to have the capacity at that moment to do anything other than what he was told. Tracy sat across from him. She folded her hands on the desk. She gave him a moment to collect himself, the way a teacher gives a student time to recover from embarrassment. He began. "You don't have to speak yet," she said gently. "Let me." And she told him, quietly and without theatre, what she remembered of the day he had dismissed her, not to punish him with the memory, but because she felt he deserved to hear it stated plainly by the person it had happened to, in a space where he could not dismiss it or rationalize it or walk away from it. She told him about the 36 hours without food. She told him about Emeka's inhaler. She told him about walking in the rain and the wall she had sat on and the floor that had risen to meet her. She told him about Mrs. Adebayo and the bowl of pepper soup. She told him about the correspondence degree and the early mornings and the late nights and the years of building something brick by honest brick out of the rubble of the day he had thrown her out. She told it all plainly and without tears, because she had already cried those tears years ago in a room that smelled of camphor and old wood. When she finished, the office was very quiet. Mr. Bellow's face was undone. The polished arrogance, the carefully maintained veneer of authority, all of it had simply fallen away, the way facades do when they meet something real. What remained was a man in his mid-50s, tired and frightened, looking at the consequences of his choices in the face of the woman he had once told to go and die. He bent forward in his chair, and he put his face in his hands. "Tracy," he said, and his voice cracked on her name. I am so sorry. What I did to you, what I said to you, I had no right at all. I was a cruel man. I treated people who depended on me, people who needed grace, with contempt. And not just you, many people, but you." He looked up. His eyes were wet. "You were hungry. You told me you were hungry. And He could not finish. The silence stretched. Tracy watched him. Her expression did not harden, but it did not soften into easy forgiveness either. She held the space between them carefully, with the same precision she applied to everything. "I know," she said finally. "I believe that you mean it. And I believe that what has happened to your business has given you the gift of understanding what it feels like to be desperate and overlooked and afraid. That is not a small thing, Mr. Bellow. Many men in your position never receive that gift." He nodded, head low, like a man receiving a judgment. "Stand up," Tracy said. He blinked. He stood. "Look around this office," she said. He looked. The certificates, the books, the steady hum of a well-run company beyond the glass doors, the life that had been built, methodically and honestly, from his act of cruelty. "I built this," Tracy said, "not despite what you did to me, not to prove you wrong either. I built it because it was always in me to build it. I just needed a door to open. You didn't open the door, but you closed the one that was keeping me in the wrong room, and someone else was kind enough to show me a new one." She paused. "I am not your enemy, Mr. Bellow. I never was." The meeting that followed was professional and practical. Tracy reviewed Bellow and Associates' situation with the thoroughness she applied to all her client cases. She asked her operations director to sit in. She requested documents. She listened to Mr. Bellow explain the state of his company with a careful and clinical ear, not the ear of a woman settling a score, but the ear of a businesswoman assessing a situation. Her conclusion was delivered without sentiment. Resilient Solutions would not be acquiring Bellow and Associates outright. The operational disorder was too deep and the liabilities too significant for that to be prudent. But she offered something else, a structured consultancy arrangement whereby Resilient Solutions would work to stabilize his supply chain and introduce him to creditors who might be willing to restructure his debt in exchange for a modest consultancy fee and, more importantly, a formal commitment to a set of workplace conduct standards that Tracy herself had drafted, standards that protected workers at all levels from the kind of treatment she and others had experienced under his management. He would have to sign the document publicly in a capacity that would be submitted to the industry association. It was not revenge, but it was accountability, and it was real. Mr. Bellow read the conduct document carefully. When he looked up, there was something in his expression that Tracy had never seen on his face in all her time cleaning his floors. Humility. "I'll sign it," he said. "Good," said Tracy. "My team will be in touch on Monday to begin the diagnostic process." She stood, signalling the end of the meeting. Mr. Bellow stood too. He extended his hand. She shook it. At the door, he paused. "The woman who found you," he said, "after I sent you away in the rain, do you know if she—" "Mrs. Adebayo is well," Tracy said. "She comes to our annual foundation dinner every year. She sits in the front row." Something crossed his face. It might have been relief. It might have been the understanding that goodness, too, has its own kind of network. He nodded once and walked out. Tracy stood at her window for a long time after he left, watching the street below. The city moved the way it always did, indifferent, restless, teeming with stories that would never make it to a boardroom or a history book. She thought about all the people who were, right now, doing what she had once done. Carrying buckets in corridors, eating one meal a day, folding pain into small, manageable shapes so that it could fit inside a life that had no room for it to unfold fully. She thought about them the way she had always thought about things that mattered, with intention. Resilient Solutions had, by this point, grown to over 60 employees, many of them recruited specifically from low-income backgrounds, trained and supported through partnerships with David's Foundation and 3 other skills organizations Tracy had forged relationships with over the years. But Tracy had been planning something larger. The Tracy Okonkwo Workers' Dignity Foundation was registered 6 months after the meeting with Mr. Bello. Its mandate was direct and unambiguous: to provide emergency support, skills training, and legal advocacy for domestic and informal sector workers facing exploitative conditions. It partnered with law firms to offer free consultations, with hospitals to provide discounted health care for registered workers, and with universities to fund correspondence degrees for adults who had missed their educational window. Tracy launched it quietly. No press conference, no fanfare, just a registered address, a small team, and a mission statement that she had written herself at her kitchen table late on a Tuesday night, in the same notebook where she kept her brother's school certificate and the letter from his secondary school principal and the photograph of herself and Mrs. Adebayo taken at Emeka's university matriculation ceremony. Emeka graduated 3 years later with first-class honours in mechanical engineering. He stood on the stage in his academic gown and looked out into the audience, and when he found Tracy's face, he pressed his hand briefly to his chest. She did the same. It was a small gesture, but it carried the whole weight of the story between them. The rice pot that had been too small, the inhaler that had run out, the mop bucket on a marble floor, and all the years between then and this. Mrs. Adebayo, seated beside Tracy in the audience, reached over and quietly took her hand. Tracy never stopped being humble. Humility was not weakness, it had never been weakness. It was the discipline that had kept her honest and sharp and human through years of difficulty that might have made a different person bitter. She never stopped being kind either, not because she had forgotten what cruelty felt like, but precisely because she remembered. And Mr. Bellow, who had been so certain that the poor were poor because they deserved to be lived with the memory of a girl on her knees in his corridor, who turned out to be the most powerful person he would ever meet, not because of what she owned, because of who she was. Friends, this story is a reminder that no matter how low life pushes you down, your story is not finished. Be kind to those who serve you. Respect is not earned only by titles and money, it is earned by character. And character, as Tracy showed us, can be built even from the hardest ground. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story. We bring you real-life stories of struggle, survival, and triumph that will inspire you, move you, and remind you of the strength within you. Coming up next, we have another incredible story that will leave you speechless. You won't want to miss it. Like this video, drop a comment, let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and tell us what part of Tracy's journey moved you the most. Share your thoughts, we read every single comment. See you in the next video. God bless you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.